In this video, I'm really excited to share with you some of my favorite spring blooming plants for a beautiful foolproof garden this spring. I'll walk you through each plant with a photo, the key details, and any personal experience I have with each so that you can choose the best plants for you. My name is Amy, and over at prettypurpledoor.com, I help home gardeners design landscapes that are uniquely you. So let's get right into this list. Okay, so I'm going to share plants for each season of spring. So I'm going to give you 5 plants for early spring, 5 for mid-spring, 5 for late spring, so that you can have an amazing garden for the entire season. First, let's get into early spring, which is typically March through early April. First up is Lenten Rose or Hellebore. It grows in zones 3 through 9 in part shade to full shade and gets about 1.5 to 2 feet wide and 1 to 1.5 feet high. Lenten Rose is one of the first perennials to bloom in the season with nodding flowers in soft pinks, purples, and even greens. This is a shade-loving plant. It's low maintenance. It thrives in dry conditions, and it keeps your garden interesting when really nothing else is blooming. I've seen hellebores bloom when there's still snow on the ground. Dwarf iris grows in zones 3 through 9 and takes full sun to part sun. It's very small, only about 4 to 6 inches high, and it blooms in early spring. This is a tiny but vibrant iris that pops up very early in the season. It has a jewel-toned blue color, or you can get them in purple or yellow even. It's really a perfect addition to rock gardens, to borders, and even container plantings. It adds just a burst of color before most of your other perennials will wake up for the season. And another really early spring blooming plant is fumewort. This variety is called Beth Evans. It grows in zones 4 through 8 and takes part shade to full shade. So another great shade option here. And it's very small, 4 inches wide by 4 to 5 inches high. Fumewort has fern-like foliage and soft purplish pink flowers. It's a bulb that grows really well in shade and naturalizes beautifully over time, so it'll keep duplicating itself and you'll get more and more over time. It creates a really soft woodland feel and pairs perfectly with hellebores and other early blooming bulbs like that. Next up is trout lily. This grows in zones 3 through 8 in part shade to full shade. It gets about 1 foot high and only about 2 inches wide. Trout lily has these nodding yellow flowers that kind of tip over on the stems, and they're a beautiful contrast against the green color of their leaves. I just love the way that this plant looks. It's low maintenance, it spreads naturally in woodland gardens, and offers a really soft, natural look in early spring, which is kind of hard to find. Next up is pasque flower. Pasque flower grows in zones 4 through 8 in full sun to part sun, and it gets about 1 foot wide and 1 foot high. This is a tough little perennial to start the season with. It has these soft, fuzzy stems and really rich purple or pink flowers. You can get it in a couple different colors. After blooming, it produces feathery seed heads that add a lot of interest well into the summer months, so you're getting kind of a double bang for your buck here, where you're getting a really early spring blooming plant, but also having some interest into the summer is really appealing. So those are the early spring bloomers. Now let's get into mid-spring, which is April through early May. First up is Jack Frost Brunnera, one of my absolute favorite plants. If you follow this channel for any amount of time, you've probably heard me talk about this plant. It grows in zones 3 through 8 in part shade to full shade. It gets about 1.5 feet wide and 1 foot high. This is a really elegant plant that has kind of hosta qualities to it. I love the teeny tiny blue flowers that sort of dance above the really striking foliage of this plant. And it's actually a real blue, a true blue in the garden. The leaves are really cool. They're almost like a striking silver marbly leaf, and it just brightens up those little dark corners that you may have in your garden. Even after the blooms fade, the foliage is just fantastic. I actually use it as a ground cover in some of my shadier areas of my landscape. Next up is barrenwort. This grows in zones 5 through 9 in part shade to full shade, and it gets about 1 to 1.5 feet wide and just under 1 foot high. Barrenwort is tough as nails. It's a great perennial for dry shade, and it produces these delicate yellow flowers above the heart-shaped foliage. I love this evergreen foliage. It's just really, really unique and adds a lot of interest to your garden even when it's not blooming. It's really a perfect plant for tricky spots like under trees and shrubs where few other plants are going to thrive. This is going to give you that interest with the foliage, and it also flowers in mid-spring. Next up is dwarf fothergilla, and this grows in zones 5 through 8 in full sun to part sun. It's about 2 to 3 feet wide by 2 to 3 feet high and has these fluffy honey scented white flowers in spring, so it smells really, really good. It gets this beautiful fiery red, orange, and even yellow fall foliage. So it's a real standout in the fall as well. It's a compact shrub, and this is actually native to the southeastern United States. And I feel like it's a really underused alternative to more common spring flowering shrubs like azaleas and rhododendrons and things like that. So if you're looking for something a little bit different, check out dwarf fothergilla. Camesia grows in zones 5 through 9 in full sun to part sun, and it gets about 1 to 2 feet wide by 3 to 4 feet high. Camesia is the purple plant that's shown in the picture, and it's paired with tulips here. It's very resilient, easygoing bulb with very tall spikes of these awesome star-shaped blue flowers, and you can also get this in white. It's really perfect for rain gardens, meadows, and naturalized plantings. It adds a lot of height and drama to a mid-spring border, and I just love the color. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Here we have woodland phlox. Phlox grows in zones 3 through 8 in part shade to full shade. It gets about 1 to 1.5 feet wide to maybe half to 1 foot high. It's really almost a ground cover, so it doesn't get very high at all. This is a shade-loving native perennial, and it covers the ground with these soft blue or violet flowers. I've actually seen it in pinks and also whites, so you can get all different colors of this, and it's really great for early pollinators. It's a fantastic way to add color and fragrance to a woodland garden or a shady border. I find this to be really easy care and easy going. If you have a moist, rich soil, this is going to do really well for you. And this is also native to Eastern North America, which I can't believe. It's just so beautiful. I can't believe it grows in the wild. If you're liking this video, you're going to love my free flower bloom tracker. I consider these printable bloom charts to be an absolute key to creating your own 4-season garden. It's something that I use to track the bloom times of all the flowers in my own garden. So I know when each plant starts blooming, when it stops blooming, how long it flowers, and then I can maintain that color and interest throughout the entire season with no more bloom gaps. There's a link in the description below if you want to grab that free bloom tracker that I personally use. So here are some of my favorite late spring bloomers, which I'm considering to be anywhere between May and early June. First up is Bowman's Root. This grows in zones 4 through 8 in full sun to part shade. It gets about 1.5 to 3 feet wide and 2 to 4 feet high. Bowman's Root is a hidden gem of a plant. It produces clusters of these starry white flowers that seem to kind of float above it, and it has these really cool, delicate reddish stems. So a lot of interesting pieces to this plant. It's deer and rabbit resistant, and it's a great plant for adding some movement and some lightness to a late spring garden. So you're getting that breeze, and it's kind of swaying and adding that extra layer of senses to your garden, which I really love. It also gets a really nice orange color in the fall, so I put a picture of that up for you too. This is native to the eastern United States and Canada, and there's also a cultivated variety called Pink Profusion that has pink flowers if you're looking for something with a different color. Next, we have false indigo or baptisia. This grows in zones 3 through 9 in full sun, and it gets about 2 to 4 feet wide by 3 to 4 feet high, so a little bit taller plant. This has really tall spikes of deep blue flowers or purple, depending on the variety, and really attractive foliage. I really like the foliage of this plant. False indigo is a long-lived, really easy care perennial. It's highly drought tolerant and looks great even after blooming, thanks to the decorative seed pods that it gets after the flowers are spent. This is also a native plant. It's native to Central and Eastern North America. And I think there's quite a bit of variety if you look up baptisia, if you're looking for different colors. I know there's a lot of different cultivars, so you can find something that's right for you, or maybe even a dwarf version of this. Next up is Solomon's Seal. This grows in zones 3 through 9 in part shade to full shade, so another great one for shade. It gets about 1 to 2 feet wide and 1 to 3 feet high. Solomon's Seal is a really graceful woodland perennial. It's known for its elegant arching stems and the dangling bell-shaped flowers that it produces in late spring. It's got really lush foliage that remains really attractive throughout the season, even after it's done blooming. It turns almost a golden color in the fall, and it has these little small blue black berries to provide interest and food for wildlife after the flowers are gone. So this is a really great plant, especially for shade. It's low maintenance, and another native one here, it's native to Eastern North America. I love this plant. This is called Totally Tangerine Geum. It grows in zones 4 through 8 in full sun to part sun, and it gets about 1.5 feet wide by 2.5 feet high while it's in bloom. It's a lot lower before it blooms, so those orange flowers really shoot up off of the mound. I'd say the mound is maybe like 12 to 14 inches before it blooms. This is a really long blooming perennial, which is great. It produces this explosion of cheerful orange flowers from late spring into early summer, and believe me when I tell you, it's hard to find orange in this season if you're not looking at tulips. So this is a great, great option if you want that really vibrant, bright color in the spring. It has fuzzy stems, and if you're familiar with what a strawberry's foliage looks like, it has a really similar look to that. GM prefers moist but well-drained soil. It's easy to grow, it attracts pollinators, and adds just a really awesome pop of color to any mixed border, especially in the spring. GM is actually a genus of about 50 species that are from North and South America, Asia, New Zealand, and Africa. So if you're looking for something native, you're going to have to do a little bit more research to find the right one for you. I believe this one is a cultivar from Proven Winners. Next up is Amsonia. This grows in zones 4 through 9 in full sun to part shade, and it gets about 2 to 3 feet wide by 2 to 3 feet high. Amsonia blooms in late spring to early summer, and it's prized for its delicate star-shaped blue flowers. It has really feathery, needle-like foliage. It's really textured. It provides a lot of interest in the garden, even when it's not blooming. And then wait till you see this in the fall. I put a little picture up for you so you can see it. In the summer months, there'll be no blooms, but you'll have that really interesting foliage. And then in the fall, it turns this golden yellow color that's just absolutely amazing. It's out of this world. This is such a fantastic plant. I can't say enough great things about it. It's low maintenance, it's deer resistant, and adds multi-season interest to any garden in kind of a small package. This is actually native to the Midwestern and Southern United States, and it's often called Arkansas Blue Star if you're familiar with that. So now I'd love to hear what your favorite spring flowers are. So definitely drop a comment below along with the name, your growing zone, and why you love that particular flower. I'd love to hear what you're growing. If you've enjoyed this video, you're going to love my other plant list videos. I've got lists by color, privacy plants, options for different garden conditions. There's really something for everyone, so I'm going to leave a link to that playlist right here, and I'll see you over in the next video.